Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. Ethan Voss had always been unlucky when it came to travel. Delayed flights, lost luggage, and crying babies seemed magnetically attracted to him whenever he stepped foot in an airport. So when he found himself trudging down the narrow aisle of yet another overbooked flight, he wasn't surprised that his boarding pass led him straight to a middle seat in economy class. 27B, he muttered under his breath, squeezing past a man whose body seemed determined to claim both armrests as sovereign territory. Ethan barely had time to stow his bag before chaos erupted 2 rows behind him. A toddler's wail pierced through the cabin like a siren. He sighed, digging through his pocket for earbuds that would hopefully drown out the noise. Just as he was settling in for what promised to be an excruciating 3-hour flight, a flight attendant appeared at his row. "Excuse me, sir," she said with a strained smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her name had read Mara. "Could you step into the aisle for a moment?" Ethan blinked at her, confused but too tired to argue. He squeezed past his seatmates again, earning an audible grunt from Armrest Man, and followed Mara toward the front of the plane. "Is something wrong?" he asked once they were out of earshot. "Not at all," Mara replied quickly, though her nervous glance over her shoulder suggested otherwise. "There's been an administrative error with your seating assignment. We need to move you to first class." Ethan stared at her, dumbfounded. "First class? Are you sure?" "Yes," she said firmly, motioning for him to follow her through the curtain separating coach from first class. The difference was immediate and stark. Wide leather seats replaced cramped rows, and soft ambient lighting created an atmosphere of calm luxury that felt worlds apart from economy's chaos. "Here we are," Mara said, gesturing toward an empty seat marked 2A. "Your new seatmate should be arriving shortly." Before Ethan could ask any more questions, she disappeared back into coach, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his confusion. He sank into the plush seat with a sigh of relief, marveling at how much legroom he suddenly had. For once, it seemed like his luck might be turning around. That illusion shattered when his new seatmate arrived. She was tall, taller than any human woman Ethan had ever seen, with skin that shimmered like liquid silver under the cabin lights. Her eyes were large and luminous, glowing faintly green with vertical pupils that flickered like candle flames as they locked onto him. "Greetings," she said in a voice that was low and melodic, but carried an unmistakable authority. "I am Lyrian." Ethan gawked at her, struggling to process what he was seeing, or hearing for that matter. "I'm Ethan," he managed after an awkward pause. Lyrian's lips curved into what might have been a smile, or perhaps something more predatory. "You have chosen well." "Chosen what?" Ethan asked hesitantly. "To sit beside me," she replied simply, as though that explained everything. Before he could respond or escape, Mara reappeared with a drink cart and an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "Can I get you anything?" she asked Ethan hurriedly before glancing nervously at Lyrian. "Whiskey," Ethan said automatically, hoping alcohol might help him make sense of whatever was happening. As Mara handed him his drink and scurried away, Lyrian leaned closer until her face was mere inches from his own. "Under Zarethian law," she began calmly, "choosing this seat constitutes a formal proposal of marriage." Ethan choked on his whiskey mid-sip. "What?" he sputtered between coughs. "And by accepting your proposal," Lyrian continued as though he hadn't spoken, "I have agreed to bond with you as my consort." For several long moments, Ethan could only stare at her in stunned silence. "This has got to be some kind of joke," he finally said weakly. "It is no joke," Lyrian assured him solemnly. "The binding protocols are quite clear." Ethan rubbed his temples as panic began creeping in around the edges of his disbelief. This couldn't be real. It had to be some elaborate prank or misunderstanding. Right. But when Lyrian activated a holographic display on her wristband, projecting documents bearing seals from Earth's United Nations, alongside alien symbols he couldn't begin to decipher, His denial began crumbling beneath cold reality. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered under his breath as dread settled heavily in his chest. Lyrian tilted her head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost curious, and smiled faintly once more. "Do not worry," she said softly but firmly enough that it felt like both reassurance and command rolled into one statement. "Everything will become clear soon enough." Kieran Solis had been having a relatively uneventful morning at the Denver Interstellar Relations office when his comm unit buzzed with an urgent message. He glanced at the screen, his stomach sinking as he read the subject line. "Diplomatic incident. Immediate attention required." As a junior diplomat, Kieran was used to handling minor disputes, trade disagreements, cultural misunderstandings, and the occasional bureaucratic snafu. But the words diplomatic incident carried a weight that made his pulse quicken. He grabbed his tablet and hurried toward the briefing room. Inside, his supervisor, Ambassador Drayson, was pacing back and forth. The older man's usually calm demeanor was replaced by a look of barely contained frustration. "Kieran," Drayson said as soon as he entered, "we have a situation involving the Zerathian delegation." Kieran froze. The Zerathians were one of Earth's most important interstellar allies. Their advanced technology had revolutionized humanity's understanding of space travel, and maintaining good relations with them was a top priority. "What happened?" Kieran asked cautiously. Drayson gestured toward the large screen on the wall, which displayed a live feed from Denver International Airport. The camera focused on a man in his early 30s, disheveled, pale, and visibly panicked, standing next to a strikingly tall alien woman with shimmering silver skin and glowing green eyes. "This," Drayson said grimly, "that's Ethan Voss, a civilian who accidentally proposed marriage to Princess Lyrian of Zerethis by sitting next to her on a flight." Kieran blinked, certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry." "He what?" Drayson sighed heavily. "It's a Zerethian custom. Sitting beside someone of royal status is considered a formal proposal of marriage. And since Princess Lyrian accepted, well, they're now engaged." Kieran stared at the screen in disbelief. "This has to be some kind of misunderstanding." "It's not," Drayson said firmly. "The Zerethians are adamant about their traditions, and Princess Lyrian herself confirmed the engagement. She's already summoned their ambassador to formalize the union." Kieran ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the absurdity of the situation. "So what do we do?" "That's where you come in," Drayson said, fixing him with a pointed look. "You're going to mediate this mess before it escalates into an interplanetary crisis." An hour later, Kieran found himself in one of the airport's diplomatic lounges, facing Ethan Voss and Princess Lyrian. The contrast between them couldn't have been more stark. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept in days, while Lyrian radiated an aura of calm confidence that was almost unnerving. "Mr. Voss," Kieran began diplomatically, "I understand this situation is unusual." "Unusual?" Ethan repeated incredulously. "Try insane. I didn't propose to anyone. I just wanted to survive my flight without losing my mind." Lyrian raised an elegant eyebrow, but said nothing, her luminous eyes fixed on Kieran as though evaluating him. "Princess Lyrian," Kieran continued carefully, "surely there must be some flexibility in your customs. Mr. Voss didn't intend to propose. He wasn't even aware of your traditions." Lyrian tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Intent is irrelevant under Zerathian law. The act itself carries meaning." "But he didn't know," Ethan interjected desperately. "How can I be held accountable for something I didn't understand?" Lyrian turned her gaze to him, her voice calm but firm. "Ignorance does not negate responsibility." Kieran resisted the urge to groan aloud. This was going to be harder than he thought. Over the next 2 hours, Kieran tried every diplomatic strategy he could think of, appealing to reason, emphasizing cultural differences, even suggesting alternative solutions that might allow both parties to save face. But Lyrian remained steadfast. "Our customs are not negotiable," she said at one point, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ethan slumped in his chair, looking defeated. So that's it. I'm just supposed to marry her. Not necessarily, Kieran said quickly, sensing an opening. He turned back to Lyrian. Princess, surely you understand that this union would have significant implications for both our worlds. Perhaps it would be wise to delay formalizing the engagement until we've had time to fully assess those implications. Lyrian regarded him thoughtfully for a moment before nodding slightly. A reasonable suggestion. Ethan exhaled in relief. Thank you. But, Lyrian added smoothly, the engagement remains valid until such time as it is formally dissolved or consummated. Ethan choked on his water. As they left the meeting room, Kieran pulled Ethan aside. Look, he said quietly, I know this is overwhelming, but you need to keep it together. The last thing we need is for this to spiral out of control. Ethan gave him a helpless look. How am I supposed to do that? I'm just some guy from Chicago. I'm not cut out for interstellar diplomacy. You don't have to be, Kieran assured him. That's my job. He hesitated before adding, but if I were you, I'd start thinking about how you're going to handle this if we can't resolve it diplomatically. Ethan paled even further, but nodded reluctantly. Back in his office later that evening, Kieran reviewed everything he knew about Zerathian customs and culture, searching for any loophole or precedent that might help them navigate this mess. He found none. With a sigh, he leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. This wasn't just about one man's accidental engagement. It was about preserving Earth's fragile alliance with one of its most powerful allies. And if they couldn't find a way out of this soon, well, Kieran didn't even want to think about what might happen next. Princess Lyrian of Zerethis sat in her private quarters aboard the Zerathian diplomatic vessel orbiting Earth, gazing out at the blue and green planet below. Her shimmering silver skin caught the soft glow of the ambient lights, and her emerald eyes reflected the swirling patterns of Earth's oceans. She was calm on the surface, but her mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. This engagement had not been planned, not by her, not by her advisors, and certainly not by Earth's representatives. Yet here she was, bound by Zerathian law to a human she had barely met. Ethan Voss, as he called himself. A man who seemed wholly unremarkable, yet somehow intriguing in his simplicity. Lyrian leaned back in her chair, letting out a soft sigh. She had always known that her life as a royal would be dictated by duty rather than desire. As the seventh princess of Zerethis, her role was largely ceremonial, attending diplomatic events, representing her people in interstellar relations, and occasionally serving as a bridge between cultures. But this was unprecedented. Her thoughts drifted to the moment Ethan had unknowingly proposed to her. He had been so utterly bewildered, his face a mix of confusion and panic as she explained the Zerathian custom. It wasn't his fault, of course. Humans were still new to interstellar diplomacy, their customs primitive and often baffling to Zerathians. But ignorance did not absolve responsibility, a principle deeply ingrained in Zerathian culture. Lyrian stood and began pacing the room, her long lavender hair flowing behind her like liquid silk. She felt an odd pang of sympathy for Ethan. He hadn't chosen this any more than she had. Yet there was something about him, his earnestness, his defiance in the face of overwhelming odds, that intrigued her. Princess, came a voice from the doorway. Lyrian turned to see Ambassador Vayar entering the room, his tall frame clad in the flowing robes of Zerathian diplomacy. His skin shimmered like hers, but carried a darker hue, like polished obsidian. Ambassador, Lyrian greeted him with a nod. I trust you are well, Vayar said, his tone formal but tinged with concern. As well as can be expected, Lyrian replied with a faint smile. This engagement has complicated matters. Vayar inclined his head in agreement. Indeed, the human government is already expressing concerns about the implications of this union. And rightly so, Lyrian said softly. Ethan Voss is an ordinary man with no ties to diplomacy or politics. Binding him to me will undoubtedly raise questions about Earth's relationship with Zerethis. Yet the law is clear, Vaya reminded her gently. The engagement cannot be dissolved without significant consequences. Lyrian sighed again, feeling the weight of her position pressing down on her shoulders. I know. After Vayar left, Lyrian returned to her seat by the window and activated a holographic display on her wristband. The screen showed Ethan's profile, his age, occupation, genetic data, and psychological assessment based on scans conducted during their flight. He was unremarkable by Zerathian standards. His genetic markers indicated average intelligence and physical capability. His career suggested stability but little ambition. His psychological profile revealed resilience, but also self-doubt. And yet, there was something about him that made Lyrian pause. She remembered how he had looked at her, not with fear or reverence, as most humans did when encountering Zerathians for the first time, but with genuine curiosity and even defiance. He had challenged her authority in ways no one else dared to do, questioning traditions that were sacred to her people. It was refreshing. Later that evening, Lyrian attended a meeting with her advisors aboard the diplomatic vessel's council chamber. The room was circular and lined with glowing panels that displayed data from across the galaxy. Princess, began Advisor Thelix, an older Zerathian with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. This engagement is causing significant unrest among Earth's representatives. I am aware, Lyrian replied calmly. We must consider alternatives, Felix continued. Perhaps we can negotiate an exception to our customs, something that will allow us to dissolve the engagement without dishonoring our traditions. Lyrian raised an eyebrow at him, and risk undermining centuries of Zerathian law. I think not. Felix hesitated before speaking again. Then perhaps we should focus on integrating Mr. Voss into our society as quickly as possible. And how do you propose we do that? Lyrian asked evenly. Through education, Felix suggested. Teach him our ways, our history, our values. If he is to be your consort, he must understand what it means to be Zerathian. Lyrian considered this for a moment before nodding slowly. Very well. Begin preparations for his orientation. As the meeting concluded and Lyrian returned to her quarters, she couldn't shake the feeling that this engagement might be more than just a diplomatic inconvenience. Ethan Voss was an anomaly, a man who defied expectations at every turn. And while she didn't fully understand why fate had brought them together, she couldn't help but wonder if there was a reason behind it all. Perhaps this accidental union would prove to be more significant than anyone could have imagined. As she gazed out at Earth once more, Lyrian felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope that this unlikely pairing might lead to something greater than either of them could foresee. A bridge between worlds that would reshape their futures forever.